Central is in The Hague, chatting to Joanna Van Bijsterveld. Before we get started on the story, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was born here in Holland, not in The Hague. I was born in close to a place called Amerongen in Lenen, and I grew up in Amerongen. When my own parents got divorced, being as my mum is not Dutch, we ended up moving to England and subsequently Greece because she's of Greek origin, and I ended up marrying a Canadian and moving to Canada. Basically, it was a very, very nasty breakdown of a marriage, and he had me afraid enough to want to leave, basically, and I guess on some level that some of the things that he used to try to frighten me with, such as people the family were connected to, may play some role in how things have played out. I'm not sure of that, but it is a very unusual case by all standards. So, following a very difficult beginning to a divorce, my ex-husband decided to go for temporary custody of our child while the divorce was being finalised. And he tried everything he could to make that happen, but in the end I was awarded full custody and he was awarded very generous visitation rights. And after a few weekends of it not going very well, I found out that I didn't need his permission to leave with the child because I had full custody and because there are no statutes in Canada preventing a parent from leaving with a child, contrary to popular belief. So I did some investigation and found out whether I needed his written permission to leave, and when I found out I didn't, I left.
Okay, and obviously you and your daughter left Canada?
In 2005, in March.
Okay, yeah. What happened then?
I moved back to Greece because that was where I had been before I moved to Canada, and where my sister is living. So I moved to Greece. I ended up finding a job and putting the little one in daycare. She was almost 2 at the time. And then I found out from my employer that I was wanted on Interpol for kidnapping and crimes against children.
Okay. What happened then?
Well, I did some investigation to find out where I would stand, and I went to a lawyer who actually thought I was overreacting and didn't even look into the fact that I might be wanted on Interpol, and he said not to worry, and we'd been away almost a year by that point, and he told me not to worry about it and just to continue doing what I was doing, but then somebody at work who was in the know about these kind of how things like this work apparently told me that because of the way that social insurance numbers work in Europe now, it would be a piece of cake for my husband to come, find out where my daughter was in daycare, find out where I worked, and find us. So I wasn't so much worried about the Interpol thing, I was more worried about my husband being able to find us at the time, because I figured I could always prove my innocence to the authorities, so that wasn't something that was on my mind. But it was the child was still far too young for me to take a chance on that. So we were advised by somebody who was Jordanian to go to Jordan for a couple of years and keep a low profile, and that's what I did. And I got a job there, and again she went to daycare, and eventually I ended up working at her kindergarten because the hours that I was working were far too long and I wasn't spending as much time with her as I would like to. So I ended up being an English teacher for 2 years in Jordan. Okay. And she went to school there and was growing up.
Right. Or did you have to leave Jordan because of all of this?
I had to leave Jordan because what this person who had advised me to go to Jordan wasn't aware of was that they had just in fact signed at that time a treaty with Canada for extradition. So it's one of the only Middle Eastern countries that is peaceful and that is safe to live in, but it's also one of the only Middle Eastern countries, due to the fact that the king is half English and they have very good relations with North America. It's one of the only countries that actually has an extradition treaty with Canada. So this meant that when my work permit was being renewed, my employer was actually told that they had to give us up to the Canadian embassy.
Okay, and?
This is a very, very intriguing story, but I'll nutshell it for you. Basically, I had a lot of help leaving Jordan. because the Arab culture is very, very centered around the family unit, and the people who actually, in fact, were to turn me over to the authorities couldn't bear doing so when they met me and my daughter. So they actually helped me escape to England to where my mum was.
Okay, all right. And your daughter went with you to England. How long did you live there with her?
We didn't live there. We stayed there for Christmas and tried to decide, what our plan of action would be. And all my belongings were still in Jordan. We always intended to go back there because we had a very, very good, comfortable lifestyle there. But in the meantime, I wanted to come back to Europe to settle the legal issues because I couldn't renew my work permit otherwise. So we basically left the apartment intact and just packed what we needed and went to England for Christmas. My mum happened to have already been in Jordan for my daughter's birthday at the time, so we all travelled back together. And then we decided to come to Holland. Since I'm actually Dutch by nationality, we thought we'd have more success here, taking care of all of this. And I came here for 5 days and looked into lawyers who might be able to help. And the next thing I know, on day 5, I was coming out of the hotel with my daughter to meet an old neighbour that has known me since I was a baby for lunch. And 4 police officers walked up to us and arrested me.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
And from there, what happened?
Well, we were taken to the police station. Luckily, I'm very, very glad that this transpired in Holland, because apparently they were looking for us in England and they had like 8 squad cars with fully clothed police people, and you'd think they were looking for a murderer. But here they were very tactful. They had an unmarked car and they were normally dressed and just came up to me and basically told me that if I cooperated that they wouldn't handcuff me. And we went to the police station and I was allowed some time to prepare my daughter to go into foster care, which thank God I got that time, because it would have been very traumatic for her compared to what it turned out to be at that point. So I was to prepare my daughter to go into foster care, and then I had to give the police all the information that they wanted for their report, and then they went to jail.
Okay, so first we need to establish here exactly why it is that they were so anxious to get a hold of you. Why is it that they came after you in such a profound manner?
Well, this is another thing actually leading up to this. I mean, the how they found me at the hotel is also quite interesting, because I travelled with my mother and my daughter, and my mum basically booked us on her credit card and then went back to England to sort things out there because the police were knocking on her door. And she and my stepfather ended up spending the night in Slough jail and being taken to London, and there, without legal counsel, being forced to divulge my whereabouts, which is highly unusual in such a case. So...
Okay. What were the actual charges against you that they came after you? I mean,
kidnapping.
Okay.
And crimes against children, which kidnapping falls under. It's not as bad as it sounds, but obviously it's shocking when you read that about yourself. And they also stated on the Interpol notice that I'm a Canadian citizen, which I have never been. So I think that was to make the extradition an easier process. They kind of thought they'd put that I'm Canadian on there.
Okay, so now you're in jail.
Mm-hmm.
What happened then?
I spent 2 nights in jail and then was released in return for my passport on the 3rd day, and we then went to court to request that my daughter be returned, which she was. And then I had to obviously find other means of accommodation than a hotel to stay, because that was one of the stipulations. And a friend of mine who had actually said we could stay at her place changed her mind, because of course she hadn't expected me to be released within 2 days, and they were leaving for holiday. They didn't want to leave us behind by ourselves. So we basically had 1 day to find a place to live. And the neighbour that I told you about that was with me at the time of arrest, her son happened to have an apartment here in The Hague. So that's how I ended up in The Hague. We ended up renting an apartment in The Hague. But a few days later, Canada appealed my release, and I was to be rearrested, and my daughter was taken a second time. And my stepfather actually filmed the last few minutes of her being taken so that they would have proof of what really transpired in case it wasn't put on the report.
I have to go to Samira because she's not going to...
Don't you worry, sweetheart. And everything will come good.
No, I don't want
No, I don't want you to go either, but you're going to be very strong because this lady is very nice.
No,
I know.
I don't want to.
I know. And I'm going to tell you 100 stories one day, okay? About good things.
No,
It's
I don't want to go.
It's okay, you can thank Uncle Jim for this. Say thank you to him.
I don't want
That's
to
how you
go.
look after little children.
No, I don't want to go.
Jim, in my opinion and in my report, you shouldn't be anywhere near innocent children. Innocent. An innocent child you're hurting, and you know what you're doing. Because you've arranged this, nobody else.
So that was, yeah, for a child to be taken into foster care twice in 1 week, for, you know, without any real reasons for it is quite traumatic. And it happened at night. There was no reason for it to happen the way it did. They could have made an appointment and we could have had the time to prepare her accurately, and that wasn't done. She was basically taken out of bed in her pyjamas, and, you know, the foster family were actually in Utrecht, so she was taken by a male social service agent at 10 o'clock at night in the dark in her pyjamas for an hour and a half's ride to this foster care family, which I think in itself is traumatic enough.
I mean, just taken away from your mum in the middle of the night. I mean, can you imagine? It could scar a child for life.
No, well, exactly. I mean, even if a child is in danger, you know, there are better ways to do it than that, and she certainly wasn't in any danger. So, yeah.
Okay. So, of course, now comes the legal battle.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Well, the first case was purely a Hague Convention case, and for those who aren't aware of the Hague Convention, there is a convention to prevent parents from abducting their children, and it actually came about in 1980, so it's fairly out of date for these days and times, because today most parents who end up returning to the country of origin with a child are the mothers. You know, over 80% at the moment that they know of are mothers, which was not the intention when the Hague Convention was drafted. So, needless to say, the way that it's being used has caused a lot of problems and a lot of separation between mothers and their children. Basically, my husband came here, and I had just been released the second time 3 days prior to the trial date, so I didn't really have a lot of time to do any preparation whatsoever, and totally left everything in the hands of the lawyer, which in retrospect was a very bad decision. And basically my police report never made it into court, so when I tried to explain something to the judge that was in the police report, he just looked at me very blankly and asked me what police report. And it turns out that my husband had lied on his application about who actually had custody on the date of departure, which led to the decision of her being returned. And also, in the meantime, Canada had applied for my extradition, which really messed up the whole case, because the judges actually ended up saying, well, regardless of what we want to do, if this woman's going to be extradited anyway, we have no choice but to return the child to Canada, because she'll be left without either parents if the mother is extradited a few months from now. So it was a clever trick that served them very well to actually instigate the extradition process at the same time.
All right. And in terms of your access rights to your daughter now, how's your access?
Well, I actually have the court transcript of what my ex-husband promised at the time, and he did say that he was very well aware of how important it would be for the child to have contact with both parents and preserve the bond between mother and child, which he did say in court, but it actually took me 7 weeks to get the first phone call once she was in Canada. It took me 7 weeks and contact with the central authorities on both sides just to get a phone call going. So obviously, you know, he'd said one thing and done another. And the second thing is he also did say that he'd be willing to, that he'd be happy for me to have full visitation rights as long as he had custody, so that I couldn't remove her a second time, as if I would after everything that had happened. So yeah, the actual fact is that I've been trying to get visitation rights for the last 4 years and haven't had any so far. So, and the central authority have tried through the Hague Convention to apply for visitation rights, but the way it works in Canada is very different from the way it works here. Here he was represented by our central authorities instead of a lawyer, for free. And the central authority, for those who don't know, actually falls under the Ministry of Justice. So it's an unlevel playing field to start with when you've got the Ministry of Justice representing you. But in Canada it doesn't work that way. The central authority there only push the paperwork through, and you have to hire your own lawyer. And at the time I hadn't worked for 1.5 years because I was on very strict bail. So I didn't have the means to hire a lawyer, and I also find out that I wasn't eligible for legal aid in Canada. So it was a long uphill battle to first of all raise enough money to go forth, and secondly to find the right lawyer, which I believe I have now, but we're 4 years on, so...
It's how often do you chat to your daughter?
At first it was once every 3 weeks, and after a lot of negotiation, I actually obtained once every 2 weeks. And very recently, just less than 1 year ago, we have started Skyping at last, so which is such a huge step in the right direction. And just to watch the change of how she was on the first Skype call to how she is now, and how she's brightened up, and you know, just to be able to see her mum, I think, makes all the difference to her, because hearing a voice at the end of the phone and not being able to put a face to it after 4 years is a long time. So Skype has definitely been a huge blessing.
And when do you think you'll see your daughter again?
I don't know, Mel. I don't know.
Hi, my name is Maria. I've been able to take the ballet for my mommy. I love her in my heart. She's in another world. But I don't care. She's going to visit me to here, and my package going to be to Halloween, and my phone call too. Bye bye, Mommy. Have a nice day. Me too. I don't know when. Hug, kiss.
Where do you stand in terms of your legal rights? What have you discovered, and how have they been violated?
So here it says in Dutch, this is from the Ombudsman, who are a regulating body, and basically it says that children have the right to the care and contact of both parents, and this is according to the Human Rights Act, the Convention on the Rights of a Child, which is not the Hague Convention, it's the human rights aspect of things. And it basically says here, if the application of the Hague Convention leads to or results in children not having access to both parents, then it's a violation of Article 3 of the Human Rights Act on the rights of a child. And clearly, my case did violate her rights as far as that was concerned. So, and then over here I have an extract from the questionnaire on the way that the Hague Convention is actually carried out in Canada. This is Canada's response, so very valid to my case, as obviously Canada's the requesting party. And it says here that there is nothing in the Hague Convention that requires the recognition of an ex post facto custody order. An ex post facto custody order is when a parent applies for custody in the absence of the other parent, which is exactly what my ex-husband did. So he was awarded custody after the fact, and this is what led to all the confusion in this case. This and the fact that obviously he had lied about or made a mistake, because I don't know if he lied. He may have just made a very silly mistake on his application and said that he had custody at the time, but the question was very clear. He or she who had custody on the date of departure, and that was me, but he filled his own name in on that application. So. And here it also says regarding rights of access, this is very interesting, that the mandatory return dictated by the Convention is limited to cases where the removal or retention of a child is in violation of custody rights, and that the removal or retention of a child in breach of mere visitation or access rights, which is what he had, is not wrongful within the meaning of the Hague Convention.
Okay.
So basically, it means that everything that transpired in court regarding her return was completely wrong.
And here you sit, how many years down the line?
Pardon?
How many years down the line now?
Now
About your daughter?
4.
4
But
years?
this appeal happened in 2008, end 2008, the year that she was taken. This appeal took place, and they basically declared it completely inadmissible. And I even got advice not to bother appealing it because it was inadmissible. So you can't appeal an inadmissible case. And I didn't find any lawyers who were willing to. So
Yeah, of course.
So yeah. So it's actually very disheartening to be told that you're absolutely right, yet nothing can be done. I mean, where do you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah, the law doesn't protect you, does it?
No, not at all, not at all. And I mean, this isn't about being right or wrong. This is about how do we fix. You can't undo what's been done at this point, obviously. And even at that point, it may have been difficult after everything she's been through, because obviously, it doesn't really matter what he feels or I feel. How does it affect the child, you know? And nobody took that into consideration, Mel, when they took her in the first place, because we had been gone over 3 years at that point, and she was 4. So we're talking about 3/4 of a person's life being completely and utterly dismissed, and the child being returned because it's her habitual residence, a place where the last time she had habitually resided there, she was a baby. So, and this is another point which actually I don't have in my notes, but I will tell you. There is an article in the Hague Convention that also specifies that mandatory return is only necessary if less than a year has transpired, because then the child is deemed to be resettled. And the way they got around that here in The Hague was by dismissing all the time that we weren't in Holland and starting the count from the day we arrived in Holland. So they counted those 5 days that we were in the hotel as the only time that she'd been away from her habitual residence.
Oh dear.
Yeah. They talk about dismissing 3/4 of a person's life, you know, and the ramifications of sending a child back to a family she barely knew.
So obviously this is this case highlights a number of very poignant flaws within our system
Yes.
of law, government protection.
Definitely.
How has this left you feeling?
Well, at first it left me feeling disheartened, but actually it's left me feeling very, very determined. And after everything, despite the fact that I feel powerless over certain aspects that have occurred, it's empowered me to do something about it. And luckily we've actually had some very positive results because of this case. And a couple of laws have been changed in Holland because of this case and other similar cases. I did harass a few MPs to get questions asked in Parliament, and they did a wonderful job, an absolutely wonderful job. And one of them actually commented in my first interview on the national news. So they did ask questions. We never really got any decent answers to any of these parliamentary questions, but it did lead to eventually having laws passed through the second and first chamber of Parliament. Very recently, actually, they passed first chamber, so they'll be in effect as of next year. And one of those laws is that a child will be able to stay until an appeal has taken place, to prevent from what happened to me from happening to other mothers and children, and fathers for that matter. And one of the other laws that's changed is that the central authority is no longer allowed to act on behalf of the applicant parent. So they will no longer have free representative from the Ministry of Justice. They will have to be on equal footing and hire their own lawyers if they want to pursue a Hague case, which makes things a little bit more fair, I think. So those are two things that have come out of this, and they by no means make it worthwhile, but at least it hasn't happened in vain.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to encourage women who do go through anything similar to this, or anything for that matter, to look beyond the current circumstances and try and find your way out rather than focusing on what's wrong, and to realise how empowered we actually are and how important it is not to take other people's word for what you're entitled to, not to take other people's words to anything, and do your own background checking, do your own, realise, I want women to realise how powerful we are, and that a single person can make a great deal of change. So
It's been a great pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon.
thank you, Mel. Thanks a lot.